All right, we're here. Welcome to another episode of Versus Mike History. I'm your host, Michael History. Today we have a special guest in the building, author, poet, and frat brother of mine. How about you go ahead and introduce yourself?
How y'all doing? My name is Laquan Ford. My stage name or pen name is Q Sadeek. I write poetry. I'm a creative artist. I curate various creative experiences for people, but mainly I just released my first book. So this is the first time I published a book entitled Bandages and Cologne, and yeah, I share my talents.
All right. Welcome to the show, first and foremost. I'm happy to have you here. So one of the first things that I want to know is what inspired you to write poetry at all?
So I got in poetry kind of not knowing about it, really. Of course, like music, we know now is poetry, but
Right.
I got into poetry because realistically, it was a way for me to hide behind my emotions because I can disguise the fact that, well, two things. I didn't know proper grammar because of the way I was coming up, and also because I didn't know how to define my emotions, so it was easier for me to use poetry to sort of like mask that and hide all those things that I really wanted to say but didn't want to say. So I was able to put it into like some sort of code, but poetically. So that's why I got into poetry.
Okay. And around what time did all of that start to happen?
All that stuff happened in 2000. Well, it was my 15th birthday, so that's 2005. That's when it happened. Someone bought me a book for my birthday and just told me to write. She wasn't a member of my family, but she knew about things that I was experiencing. So she bought me the book and just told me to like use it as an outlet.
What book was it?
It was a notebook.
Oh, okay.
From Dollar Tree. It was like, seriously, It was like this little sky blue notebook with this white boy in the front of it. And it was different quotes in front of it. But one quote I remember, it was like, just write.
Right. Were there any other outlets that you like used before poetry to like kind of express yourself or anything like that?
Not really, but when I think about where I am now or the things I've done while in college, I sort of think about my involvement in our little street gang organization that we had, and where I sort of created that with the name and what we were going to do,
Right.
and sort of like, the ground rules, because I never really wanted to participate in like the gang life because that was the story of my father and my brothers. It never was like appealing to me. But I also knew that we needed to make money. My cousins and the friends and I were on our block, and there was a village not too far from us who were kind of like taking out like ourselves or my boys' cells because I didn't really, understand that market like that, so I didn't make the best sales.
Right.
But I convinced them that we needed to create this like group. It was called LMS, Littleton Murder Squad. And funny thing is, it became a subset of now what is a blood set in that area.
Wow.
Which I'm not proud of at all. That's not a legacy I would want to leave behind. But that's where I first got into like creating.
Right.
It was through that realm.
Okay. Okay, so, well, I don't really want to put you on blast, but you work in the educational field, right? Would you say that your work with children influences your poetry at all in terms of like, just speaking to students and like, hearing their stories and, going back to those moments in your own personal life?
Yeah and no. I wish I was in a position where I can be more real. I think I can, but I'm not that person professionally to push those boundaries because of course I need that safety net.
Right.
Because I don't have much to fall back on. So in my job itself, yes, I talk about things where as far as kids pushing themselves because I know what it's like to feel like you can't or to come to that roadblock where it's like I'm not good enough. So I know how to push kids past that. So yeah and no. I wish I was able to do more. I wish I was able to like really say what I want to say, because I feel like those are the moments where people benefit the most, and those are the moments like where I benefit the most when people, teachers, counselors, whoever took those risks in telling me like what I really need to hear. I'm not at that point yet where I can just like do that for kids.
Right. And okay.
At least in my job.
Right.
In the position I'm in.
No, I understand. When you write poetry, when when it comes to your poetry in general, does it take more vulnerability to write it or to perform it?
It takes more vulnerability to perform it.
Okay. Speak on that a little bit.
When writing, well, at least I write with a vulnerable pen. That's when I write. I don't worry about what people are going to think about, because I don't know if they're going to read it. I don't know if they're ever going to see it. My book itself, like that was a diary almost. Like that was something that was sacred to me.
Right.
So when I write, I'm vulnerable already. But when it comes to like orienting, like that, those thoughts and those feelings and those connections and the poeticness, it's scary because you don't know if people are going to understand it. Especially with some of my shoes where I feel like I don't have the best grammar or know how to, articulate what I really feel. And in my head, I use poetry to sort of disguise that. But when you're getting in front of people, try to explain what you're emotionally feeling to a situation that's sort of popular amongst your audience, is sometimes just like you're worried. At least I was worried about, are people going to like not understand it? And then two, are they going to push back on like what I believe, my perspective was from that experience? Some people may say like, from the way I write, some people may say like I'm selfish in my approach to my situation, or some people may say like I was needy,
Right.
So it takes confidence really, like when you're.
I want to expound on that a little bit. So, like, when you perform, like, what does the crowd's reaction do to you? And more specifically, speak on some times where the crowd reacted in a way that like helped you and pushed you further, or they reacted in a way that kind of like deterred you a little bit.
I learned a lot actually. That's a really good question, but the one thing that is in my mind, I learned a lot from like crowd's reaction. When I say things about like, I have a poem about my mother being raped.
Right.
To me, that's just as like talking about, your lunch card being stolen. That's how I feel as far as that. That's a level for me. It's like it's that simple. But when I talk about it in the poetry, people think it's deeper than what it is. People are really affected by it. So I have to sort of, my emotional affect when I'm performing has to be a bit toned down,
right?
Because I really don't feel, any type of remorse, toward, my parents or anything they really did. Like I forgive them, but I don't feel any type of remorse when I'm performing those poems because I'm performing it in the language in which I wrote it. Okay. So I'm able, to sort of answer your question, I'm able to like differentiate between when I was being real and when I wanted to perform.
Right.
So,
how do you think that your childhood like influences your poetry in terms of like how you write it, how you perform it, and how people receive it?
Well, I can't really control how people really receive it, but as far as like writing, I don't change the core of my writing.
Right.
If I feel, a certain way about something that happened to me in my childhood, I have to be honest, because I think that's when the best poetry, that's when the best, response comes out. That's when I remember the best moments that are like, I'm right. I got poems about, my parents smoking coke, but it's hidden behind the fact that, the title of the poem is Burning Spoon.
Right.
I can hide behind that. Not everybody know that a burning spoon is like, synonymous with like doing, crack, cocaine. Not a lot of people know that, but it's a way for me to like sort of expound on like the creativity behind like pain. Because some people use it in a way it's like buy into me, and some people use it in a way it was like, pay attention to like how I use it,
right?
Type of thing. Not like it's not attention sinking. It's more like I want you to learn from how I can make these connections, and that's how I want to live, or at least lead with my art. It's like I want you to understand the connection, not so much I want you to pay attention to me because I'm past that already. So that's how I use my childhood experiences to sort of like influence the way I write. And when it comes to like the actual style of writing, it changes because sometimes I want to do what people expect me to do, like the real like grammatical structure of the English written language, but I also don't want to change my actual language. Yeah, I don't want to change. I don't want to change my voice. Yeah, because that's where I feel I lose most of the story. Is when I'm trying to like do what people expect me to do. Yeah. But it's really difficult, honestly. So I kind of understand Kendrick in that approach where he sort of writes for people.
Word.
What people expect from him to say.
Okay, so the book is out.
Yes.
It's entitled Bandages in Cologne. I want you to speak on how you came up with the title.
All right, so I came up. So that's my Tumblr handle. I came up with. I had a Tumblr 2011. I wrote, and Tumblr was a way for me, or at least a platform for me to really be myself with no real judgment. I can say what I want without people saying that was harsh, or I can be who I want without people knowing, the side of me that I didn't want them to know at that time. And it was practice for me. It was a world that people still supported you and loved you as if they knew you outside of virtual life. People still supported you on Tumblr, but it still wasn't real enough. But it felt like, all right, they're okay with what I just said,
Right?
Because you're not used to saying it in public, so this is okay right now. And I went further than that. So I named my Tumblr that because it was a way. I'm like, no way people are going to find my Tumblr, and it made sense to me at that time. Bandages and cologne, but so with a bandage. We use a bandage to, cover a wound, to heal, to help it in this healing process, until it gets to the point where you don't need it anymore. And cologne, some of us use cologne or perfume to sort of like enhance our natural scent, to not, walk out as is. And it's not an issue, but I feel like when it applied to my life figuratively, it was a way for me to say, I don't need to like worry so much about my story anymore, like the pain and the hurt. It's time for me to take that bandage off and live in this new decade in my life. And when it came to the cologne side of things, it's just like not to just live, but live my true self. Not worrying about what people are going to say about me, not worrying about feeling like I don't fit in, not worrying about feeling like I can't define who I am in front of people, or that I need to define who I am in front of people because, I'm still learning myself. I just got tired of wearing masks. So, I take the bandage off, I go without the cologne. And I'm just my natural self. And that's in these last 2 days, that's just been the best way for me to be myself. I never felt this much joy or happiness before.
That's excellent. Okay, so you mentioned that it took a while for you to put this book together, right?
Yes.
Speak on the beginning process of putting this book together and kind of the tail end, because I know the tail end has to do with you putting the tour together and you actually publishing and the rollout for everything. But I feel like in the beginning, all you really had to do was focus on your words.
Right.
And I kind of want to get a contrast of like how the process has evolved over time.
All right. So initially originally I was going to put out an autobiography, right? But I thought at this time in my life, I wasn't where I would want to be. When I like autobiographies, those people that inspire me, I feel like I'm not at that place yet. So I said, why don't I try to learn the publishing process by putting out my poetry first, without realizing that my poetry was more revealing than my biography would ever be, because these are honest feelings. These are things I wrote after feeling what I felt, So I still challenged myself. I pushed myself. It's like, I finally understood why it was more important for me to be myself than to be anyone else. So when it came to my writing, when it came to my talents, I started like noticing how good I was, or at least trying to notice how good I was, so that I can like establish a brand for me, not for public. I wanted to establish a brand within myself. So when I started rereading my poetry, I was able to comfortably say, like, you know what, like I don't like that part, or I really love that. And it got to a point when in 2013, I reread everything and I said, like, actually, I enjoy my poetry. I enjoy what I write. I enjoy the way I think. And so I believed in me. So those next 2 years, and then even years beyond, I started changing the way, my writing style was. Not so much my voice, but my writing style, meaning my connections, like expounding on it, learning new methods on, how to connect, our experiences to nature and other things beyond, but more so how to make our story stay the same without changing, the hood lingo. I wanted to keep that rawness in there, that the first language I learned, which is what people call Ebonics. Like, I wanted to keep that in it because it's still, I feel my thoughts on, the English language is like, as long as people are able to understand your communication and what you're trying to communicate to them, you're doing okay.
Right.
And that's what made me comfortable with what I was writing. And that's where I got to the end of my writing process, where I was like, I'm just going to put this out there. Not only am I not afraid anymore about the actual content, but I'm not afraid about how I wrote it. If it's something wrong, it's just wrong. It's just going to be the wrong way for me to use a word. It's just going to be that. I had an editor, but my editor wanted to change my voice, and I wasn't with that. So I did without him and just put my book out because I believed in the stories I told.
He wanted to change your voice. Speak on that a little bit.
He kind of wanted. So I remember I had a line in a poem that was just like, I was talking about an ex of mine, and I was just like, you replace the hurt my parents written on my existence, and he was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like he said, that line doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, to you, it doesn't make any sense. For me, it means, I was once hurting because of my parents, and then when I met you, this other person, the other object, you started making me hurt, so I didn't even think about my parents. That makes a lot of sense to me.
How could he tell you that it doesn't make any sense?
Also because he's white, but
that doesn't even make sense to me, because like, if you felt it, then how could it not make sense?
Right.
It's invalidating.
If you knew the objects and the subjects that I was talking about, I feel
that's insane.
You got it. So I just think it wasn't his choice of words and the way I phrased it. But for me, that's what I would have said if someone put me on the spot. Those exact words I would have said.
Right.
So I just have to be confident in my voice, and that's by the end of this book. I actually finished this book December 30th, 2019.
Okay.
Because I changed my the preface is like I had a line in there. It was like, this woman who bought me my poetry book, my first book, and when she told me to write, and I remember telling her I wrote my first 3 poems. I remember telling her I want to be a poet. I had found this poem by Langston Hughes, and I just was like, all right, there's another black person that wrote poetry,
right,
and I think he's famous. It was Black History Month, so I'm like, all right, I can probably do something similar. And when I came to her, I was excited, and I told her, and she was just like, that's not realistic. And that's where I started like numbing what I really wanted and doing what other people wanted me to do. And that's what took me along with this book. Honestly, it's just people don't expect Laquan to put out a poetry book, unless you really knew me and like,
yeah, that's really interesting, because it takes a lot to find a new way of expressing yourself, one, and two, it's important that when you get comfortable in that space of creation, that you can bring it to somebody else and that they can validate those emotions in that process. Right. So you're going on tour with the book. Has it started yet? Has the tour started yet?
It kind of started before my book launch, because
right.
I had my first show was actually Newark, but because it's poetry, it's kind of like, it's not tour in the sense of like I'm that feature. I'm only a feature artist when I go to Chicago in April. Every other city I'm going to is more like an open mic. I'm going to an open mic where people know me, and that's a good start for me. But it's a tour. I'm gonna call it what it is. It's a tour. I'm going to these places.
I would consider it a tour too, right, honestly, because if it's if you're performing at a location and you can get people up, then right, it's a tour.
It's a tour.
Speak on the beginning process of the tour though, and like even the book launch. When I was there, all the lights were off, so I wasn't able to see the rest of the crowd's reaction, and I wasn't sure if you were able to see the crowd's reaction at all.
I wasn't.
But I wanted to know if that like was intentional, if that like helps you, if that helped the process get along, move along, or if that was like kind of hindering.
For me, it was kind of twofold. It was like it helped my creative, or at least creatively, what I wanted in the audience. I wanted to have a different experience. If you go to the movies, it's pitch black, dark, so you only focus on the screen. Right. Or if you pull out your phone, that's the same thing I wanted for the audience. It's like I wanted to give them a reason to believe like this $10 was worth it. Right. That this person is really creative. Outside of even writing. That's why when I initially with the opening act was a silhouette. That's why originally it was dark, because like you needed to see the actual dance, and not so much me. But I also made sure it was dark again at the end of it, because I knew that there was a potential for me to read, my last poem that I read, and I was going back and forth for whether or not I was going to do it. Originally, I wasn't. Right. Even like minutes before the show, I was like, yeah, I'm just not going to do it. But then something came over me where I felt like I needed to do it. Yeah. Like I needed to read that last poem, that last page of that book, because it was worth it. These couple hours prior, it's just like, I would never trade these shits back. So I think like performance wise, I chose that. That was purposeful. I wanted it to be dark, but I also wanted to see the crowd reaction, and I wasn't able to see the crowd's reaction. And supposedly, you know, there were people that stood up, and I never saw that, you know, after I read, you know, the last poem, and there were people in the audience that I just met. They were, for my brother, for example, I had just met my younger brother that night, and he got to meet me the real way, and I was actually proud of that, you know, versus, you know, people having their opinions. I just really didn't care.
Okay. How do you seek people to react to your work?
I try not to worry about it. I try to just accept whatever their feelings may be, because again, like they're the reader. They're who I'm trying to like market this to. I'm not trying to make them conform to how I feel, or to conform to what I believe in, or even to conform to, you know, who I am. I'm more so just asking them to understand the experience, and maybe that can help someone else in their life. Maybe that book can get into someone else's hands. I'm not too concerned about anything outside of that.
Okay. Okay, so the future of Sadeek or Laquan Ford as an author. Are there more poetry books coming? Was this like a one-off thing where it's like, all right, I just got to get this off?
I don't want to say no. Initially, I did want to say no. That like that's like, I mean, I want to say yeah. Like actually, that's the last poetry book, but I don't even feel like this is actually a poetry book. I feel like it's just a poetic narrative, like of my experiences. I don't feel like I put out a poetry book itself, although, you know, it's Life of Poetry, but I feel like I put up more of a narrative, like the Harlem Renaissance, where like their poems were like actual letters and like stories. It wasn't something that was like a, you know, like Rupi. I love Rupi Kaur, but it wasn't something that was like line by line, or it wasn't like a haiku. It wasn't something that was like structured. It was more of an experience that you use poetry to sort of, you know, alliterate better, to give like more pop to it. And I think, of course, anything I write is going to be written that way. Any movies I write, any shows I'm writing right currently, they're going to be written in that way, that same format. I love For Colored Girls because that is my idea of writing. And when I come to like big screen, when I saw that, I was like, all right, it's doable. Because that was in my head.
Right. Okay. Actually, that raises an interesting question. Well, two questions actually. One of who are your influences, and two of, well, I'll let you cover the influences first, actually.
All right, so I used to have very recently I have really difficult time saying who influenced me, but it's easier for me to say whose work I enjoy. All right, this person's work ethic I really enjoy. Tyler Perry's work ethic, I just, it's no way for anyone to like look over that. No matter the critiques of the art,
honestly,
it's just like his work ethic is like ridiculous. And as far as like talent goes, I'm really a fan of Lee Daniels. Okay. I'm a fan of I forget his name, but he's actually frat that directed Moonlight. Moonlight cinematography, like the cinematography, like the color schemes, everything about that movie was so perfect. And not even just the story that I identify with, but it was just like the way it was shot, the angles, the way that they involve like natural lighting, and it was something. It was an experience for people who are trying to get into that into that life, into that talent. Like I never understood like before watching that movie, I never really paid attention to, you know, color schemes in movies, except for of course with Belly. You were kind of forced to, you know. But before then, you never really thought about, you know, the cinematography, you know, and stories and stuff like that. But
Barry Jenkins.
Barry Jenkins, yes.
I didn't know he was right. That's crazy.
That movie, literally, you know, outside of the story, it was shot beautifully. It was the writing was beautiful. It was like everything tied together perfectly. So that influences me, like I guess perfection.
And that was easily the best movie that came out that year.
Yeah, I hope easily I do the same thing. And also Shonda Rhimes, of course. And
Shonda Rhimes is genius.
You can't do wrong with them. And those are people I want to pitch to, or at least be in front of one day. Okay,
so it sounds like the goal is to start with poetry, but to move into screenwriting and move in TV and film. And that's always been a goal, or has the poetry influenced you to move into that realm?
A really good question. It's never really been. I've known that writing came to me naturally, like stories. I'm not gonna say writing, but stories always came to me naturally. I never knew what I wanted to do with my life. Like my job now, though I love it, it's a really good job. I don't feel like that's something that I ever wanted.
Right.
The security, yes, like I can afford the security that I wanted, but it's not something I wanted to wake up to do. You know, when I put out this book, when I first realized that night before Thursday, before I put out the book was coming out, that's the only time in my entire life where I felt like when I woke up in the morning, I was going to fulfill something that I wanted to do in my life. Not even graduation, none of that shit. It never mattered to me.
It's amazing.
But that day, you know, on Thursday, when I woke up and realized my book was going to be actual, you know, available to people, I realized like that's what I want to do. You know, that's something I want to, you know, wake up and continue to feel. That's something I can celebrate. I don't want to celebrate college. I never knew what the hell it was, like something that you had to do, you know, but writing is something I kept quiet because someone told me that it wasn't realistic, and I listened to them. And then when you finally realize that you were wrong and then you try to get into it, I got into it and it's like people already knew everything. And I was like, I felt like I was too late to it, you know, that I was like not good enough, or I would never understand what really goes on a set. Like I still don't, you know, I want to get into it, but it's sort of like, it pushes like the things you really believe are really good. It pushes it to the back burner, and it's like, I need to learn first, you know, when you should probably figure out what works best in that situation, whatever time you're in. But, you know, I just want to write. That's it. Right. I want to write, and I don't know what that means. I just know that's what I want to do.
You know, I can relate to that in the sense that like I love TV and film as well. Like I watch way too much television, but it's because I love being I love coming into somebody else's world, or coming into a world that somebody sat and really outlined and put together. And you know, I also work in the education realm, and a lot of times when I feel like I'm doing really good work, and I don't really feel like I'm not doing good work or good work for the community, but at the same time, I feel like I'd be better off creating an environment that people could relate to so that they can turn around and do it themselves in a way that feels comfortable for themselves. So a recent story that I read online was that Tulsa was going to start including the massacres into their education system, and that happened because
America's massacres.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And they're deciding to do that because of the show Watchmen. It's a show on HBO. It's kind of like a comic book show, but it touches on that very prominently. And I thought that was very interesting because I'm like, wow, it took all of these years, and that's not necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily call it a win, because you know it took a work of fiction, and while I'm not downplaying the importance of fiction in our society, but I'm not downplaying the role of fiction in our society, but it's incredible to me like that somebody's work of fiction influenced an education system to change their narrative moving forward. And I guess I think that's about it. Yeah. I think we all done here.
Yeah. I mean, fiction is, I get what you're saying. Like social, politically, like that shouldn't have been like an influencer. But I think with fiction itself, like at least for me, like my imagination is what really set me apart from my cousins who all grew up in the same house and had the same circumstances, with the same schooling. It was just that I was able to dream because I enjoyed the stories, like similar to what you said, putting yourself in someone else's, you know, realm where, you know, I feel like we didn't choose to be in this realm.
No, not at all.
That's why I feel like
I mean, and honestly, if I go into it even deeper, like what it really was like growing up, me and my sister are 5 years apart. So, and she's a girl, I'm a guy. So the things that she was like enjoying and into at the time, like as a child, I just wasn't into. So, and she's already 5 years older than me. So that took me to like just sit in my room, play with toys, come up with stories with them playing, you know what I mean? Like, and that just led to me like that was like the inception of like me becoming a creator and like creating the narratives, creating art, creating all of these different things. And it's just crazy pinpointing like real life situations that influence like imagination. And that's like that'll never cease to amaze me.
Like you realize sometimes too, and I'm gonna let you in, but you realize sometimes too that those moments where we just remember sitting there, you actually had like a real world, like with these
Right.
action figures, and it's like you really felt what you were trying to implement in them. Like, even though you couldn't put
Yeah.
them in there, you had like it worked, it made sense. Like, but a lot of people don't talk about those moments because, like, think about it. We were in that room for like 2 hours probably,
Right.
and we didn't even thought about it. It just
Yeah.
like it was like, all right, I'm building on something. And it's like we didn't even know what we were doing, and then somehow, as days went on, as like we matured, people started like quieting that creative piece in us and started making it so small where we like you couldn't believe in it. You know, there was no way you could believe in it because it didn't belittle it so much. And I think it takes people to remember their childhood. You know, I have a poem about that, but in a book. But it takes people to remember their childhood, to remember just how simple it was to be in a relationship,
Right.
to court someone. Remember,
Yeah.
like you didn't have text messages. You literally had to wait to go back to school.
Yeah.
To like, even if it's like playing footsies, that was enough for you at that time. You know, it was something where it's like the very simple things of just like person, like even like you used to push somebody. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, that was enough for me today. You know,
Yeah.
like, it's like it made sense. But that's why I used to say, just like if we remember our kid selves and our adult lives, we would do things more simpler, and we wouldn't worry so much about the things that really don't matter, like the
Absolutely.
instant gratification of a response. Yes, we know and can do that, but like, why does that matter? I mean, that's a deeper conversation.
Yeah.
But like, I just feel like, you know, when you mentioned it, like dreaming and imagination and just being a kid, like it's important for us not to forget so much of it. I know Scripture tells us to, like, you know, to bury it, but I think our kid
Nah, I
life will
ain't
tell
with
us more
that.
about ourselves than our adult life because we're learning in this shit.
Yeah.
Our kid life has always been established.
It's a very interesting take. Okay. The book is out.
Yes.
The tour is about to start. How about we plug everything?
All right. So I'm on Instagram, Q, the letter Q as in quiet storm. The underscore Sadeek, SAD as in David, EEK as in King on Instagram. The book's title is Bandages as in a bandage, and cologne. Just that simple on Instagram. And you can find the website is laquan4.com. On laquan4.com, you can find everything relevant to this particular book and this particular project, but also my calendar is there, so you can sign up for the newsletter and just hear about anything I'm doing, any type of, you know, moves I'm making in my next projects and stuff like that. So, yeah, those are my plugs.
Alrighty. And this has been Versus Mike History. You can find us on Instagram at Versus Mike History. Find me on Instagram at Last Name History. And find the podcast on Twitter at Versus MH. And follow me on Twitter at Mike History. And it's been real.